Hello, everyone, and welcome to the panel discussion, Behavioral Change Approaches to Reducing Economic Informality in Albania. My name is Ekaterina Lisova, and I'm a Senior Program Officer at the Center for International Private Enterprise, or CIPE, and I'll be moderating today's event. I know that some of our colleagues are still joining this event. It's still early hour in Washington, D.C., however, many of our colleagues from Albania already joined, so let us begin. And first, I would like to very quickly introduce that this panel discussion is organized by the Center for International Private Enterprise, which is a nonprofit founded almost 40 years ago and is based in Washington, D.C., with teams in over a dozen countries and partners in 60+ countries around the world. CIPE is one of the four core institutes of the National Endowment for Democracy and an affiliate of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And CIPE's mission is to strengthen democracy around the globe through private enterprise and market-oriented reforms. And the problem of economic informality or economic undeclared activities is one of the key issues that CIPE is working on with the partners around the globe. This event takes place under the framework of the Week of Integrity Initiative in Albania, with various events happening this week from December 1st to December 10th. You can check the schedule of various events that are happening at weekofintegrity.al. Let me quickly walk you through the agenda of this event. We will begin with a brief presentation from Professor Brunilda Costa, who will share some examples of behavioral change approaches tested in Albania in recent years based on her most recent research of economic informality in Albania. After the presentation, and as an example of one of such behavioral change approaches, we'll play a 3-minute animation video followed by a quick pop-up quiz for everyone who is attending this session.
We are very sorry for the inconvenience. Maybe Katya is having an issue with her internet, but let's start anyway, so we don't waste any more time. Katya, I was giving the floor to Bruna now, as maybe you had some internet issues. You are on mute.
Can you hear me now? For some reason, I just got locked out of the meeting. I apologize for that. Well, this is our new reality. So can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
I apologize for that. All right, so yeah, at some point, well, that happens. So I just wanted to say that I probably was saying that we would proceed with our panel discussion with our esteemed guests and experts on the topic, Professor Colin Williams from Sheffield University in the UK, and Director for Policy and Program Learning at CIPE, Dr. Kim Patcher, and also Professor Brunilda Costa. The panel discussion will be in a question and answer format with the panelists, and it will last for about 30 minutes. And after that, we'll open floor for Q&A with the participation from the audience, but everyone is welcome to send their questions or comments in the chat option. So we will try to address as many questions as possible by the end of this session. This entire session is 1 hour long, so we'll try to close promptly at 3 p.m. Central European Time or 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Before I introduce Professor Brunilda Costa, I would like to mention that this topic for the discussion has emerged as a result of CIPE's previous work on informality in Albania and some recent global discussions on the role of behavioral science and behavioral economics in promoting change in human behavior. Particularly the recently published revised edition of the book Nudge by the Nobel Prize winning economist Richard Thaler and Harvard Law School professor Cass Sunstein has revived the discussion about how nudges, in addition to more traditional incentives stipulated in the national policies, can affect change to address some of the most critical and complex issues. And let me clarify that nudge is defined as intervention that alter people's behavior in a predictable way without forbidding any options or significantly changing the economic incentives. In short, the nudges should be fun, simple, and not expensive. And the examples of nudges all around us, of whoever is not familiar with this concept, these are, for example, reminders or default options, or the way we frame the issues, or for example, our audio that will introduce you today. So all of these examples of nudges, and one example that is mentioned in this nudge book comes from China. And I'll quickly tell you what this example is about, just to put us all on the same page. As in many parts of the world, China has a thriving cash economy, and it's common for small businesses like restaurants to evade paying sales tax. To combat this behavior, the government printed up special receipts that are supposed to be given to restaurant customers when they pay. Cleverly, each receipt includes a scratched off lottery ticket, giving customers an incentive to ask for a receipt, which then makes the transaction reportable to the government. So for this session, we thought and we hope that we would invite renowned local, regional, and global experts to share with us various examples of such behavioral change interventions or nudges and incentives that can help tackle the issue of undeclared economic activities in Albania. So the three key objectives of the sessions. The first one is really promote a shared understanding of the phenomenon of economic informality. As we know, there are over 40 definitions of it, and we will all want to be on the same page. So this is one. The second objective for this session is to encourage decision makers and other stakeholders to try to test some of the most effective behavioral change techniques to tackle informality in Albania, those that our experts will share with us. And the third is to inspire the business community to pursue more formalization practices as the way to improve competitiveness and to take advantage of business development opportunities. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Professor Bruna Costa, a professor at the Faculty of Economy, University of Tirana. Since 2013, she has been researching the issue of economic informality. Over the last 8 years, with the support of SAIP, Bruna worked with Albanian Chamber of Commerce, business associations, and firms to draft policy papers and the national business agenda, all aiming to find solutions to tackle informal economy from the lens of the private sector. In 2018, Professor Bruna Costa was appointed as the national expert for Albania on informal economy to the Regional Cooperation Council to draft the national strategy tackling informal economy. This year, Bruna joined SAIP as an informal economy specialist and prepared a research paper describing the current situation and the main challenges of business formalization. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Katya, for your kind introduction. Just please give me a few seconds to share my screen, my presentation. Okay, I hope everyone sees my screen. So, hi everyone, it's so nice to be here today in this wonderful panel discussion. In this short presentation, we will talk about the sticks versus carrots measures in tackling undeclared economic activities. As Katya mentioned, this presentation comes as a result of a research paper we have been working on during this last 6 months. But just to note that this presentation does not highlight all the key findings, but only those which basically will serve as food for thoughts for our panel discussion. Basically, the informal economy, it's not only a local issue, it's a global complex issue, but depending on the places, we explain it differently and we tackle it friendly. So in this short presentation, I will just share a simple, very simple definition of economic informality by providing a snapshot, which came as a result of a long consultation with the private sector and the government representatives. And then we will talk about some key determinants, why the informality in Albania is so persistent, by paying a more attention to the interaction or the nexus between informality and corruption. Then I will just jump into some measures, sticks and carrots that the Albanian government has been undertaking to reduce economic informality, but with more emphasis on these nudge measures that basically aims to change the behavior of taxpayers. But first, let's us introduce with the definition of informal economy. What is economic informality? Give it in a very simple way. Informal economic activity is economic activity that is legal in nature, but it is not declared. And at this point, this becomes illegal. I will share a very few examples, very simple ones to make it very understandable for the wide audience. For example, my dad always goes in the morning to a very small coffee bar, which is near to his house, to get a coffee. He always says to me that he goes there because, this coffee bar is managed by an old couple, but this coffee bar is not registered. So it does not have the sign of registered in the National Business Center. This is an example of an unregistered business, and we call it an informal business. Another example is still from my dad. He goes to a very small supermarket and he buys products. Basically, this supermarket is registered, but the lady that serves there does not issue a receipt always. And he always complains that I always ask for a receipt because we always educate people around us, but the lady says always that the fiscal machine is not working, or sometimes she gives another receipt from another transaction. So this is an unregistered transaction that goes nowhere. So it's not registered. This is another informal typology. The third one is from my brother. My brother works as a sales consultant. His salary is 800 euros per month, but basically he gets only 400 euros in his bank. And the remaining one, he gets it in cash, in envelope. To some extent, he was very happy one day. He was just telling me that this envelope wage is not taxed, so he gets more cash. But one day he went to the bank because he wanted to get a loan. And that credit officer said to my brother that the amount of the loan is very small because they don't consider the real salary. They only consider the official one. This is another typology. Or other businesses which basically uses various maneuvers not to declare sales, not to declare profits because they want to be less taxed. As you see from this very simple example, everyone is affected from economic informality. So basically the government does not have revenues from taxes. So if the government does not have these kind of revenues, they cannot invest in public services. So the citizens on the other side are affected. Formal businesses are affected. Formal businesses which are fully compliant with the state regulation, they pay, but basically they pay even for informal businesses, because on this side, informal businesses do have this kind of cost advantage because they have some extra cash they can invest because they are not paying taxes. So everyone is affected and everyone is harmed by informal economy. So what is the size of economic informality in Albania? To come up with a snapshot of the situation, current situation in Albania, we consulted 200 firms in Albania, and we developed focus group discussions with the private sector and with the government representative, and we come up with a clear view. It's definitely clear that informality in Albania is a serious issue. And various sources confirms that it counts for around 35 to 50% of the GDP. And as you see from the first table, we basically expect from years, especially during the last 10 years when the government has been undertaking various measures to tackle informal economy, we expect a reduction of informal economy. But basically we see that figures are deteriorating. If you see the first indicator, that the percent of of businesses that compete with unregistered one has been increased compared to 2013, or the informal employment is 32.5%, or more than half of businesses confirm that, yes, we are competing with informal economy. The key question in this point is, why is economic informality so persistent in Albania? From our research, we came with some factors. First of all, unregistered businesses confirm that they don't want to become part of the system because they are afraid of tax inspections. So if they are detectable, then they will come visits from labor inspections, tax inspections, and various enforcement agencies. Second, it's a perception that tax rates in Albania are very high. When I say taxes, I do consider here various taxes, but I'm not just paying too much attention to this. The third one is corruption, which I will pay a few seconds in the next slide. The fourth one is they don't trust the government. So business told me during the interviews, why should I pay taxes if my government is not transparent? I don't know where the government is spending my taxes. I don't see the public services being promoted through various channels. So I don't pay taxes. The fifth one is trusting competitors. If my direct competitor is informal, and I know that it's not fully compliant with the state regulations, then why should I pay taxes? Because my informal competitor is taking advantage of this kind of situation. And the last one is the lack of capacity. We all know that 99.8% of Albanian businesses are micro, small, and medium enterprises. Especially the micros one do not have the capacity, professional capacity, legal capacity, and financial capacity to comply with the changes, and I'd say frequent changes of legislations. So they decide to stay informal. As I mentioned, one of the key factors that basically made businesses stay informal is corruption. However, I would emphasize that corruption and economic informality is a dual, they have a dual relationship, meaning they impact each other. And like businesses that are informal are more inclined to pay bribes to public officials because they know they hide their sales or other type of policies. On the other side, public officials that know that businesses are informal are more inclined to indirectly require for bribes. So as a finding, informality undermines compliance and increases vulnerability to corruption. But has the Albanian government undertaken measures to tackle informal economy? Of course. This slide basically highlights the traditional approach, basically using the stick for informal businesses to become formal. And I would emphasize here the frequent changes of the labor code. For example, in 2016, they made the contract between employer and employee mandatory, or the very high increases of penalties. Sometimes they close businesses to showcase the informal ones that, look, this is what will happen if you continue to stay informal. On the other side, they invested into innovation and technology, so to increase the capacity of the tax administration to detect the informal businesses. They collaborate with some other enforcement agencies to make sure that all the efforts were coordinated. But still, these are all sticks, and all these sticks measures installed the punishment culture in Albania. Do we have some carrots for the private sector? Of course. The Albanian government basically and only recently provided some tax incentives, like for example, zero VAT for micro and small businesses, zero profit tax for small businesses, or some informational campaigns for private sector on the benefits to formalize from the General Taxation Directorate, or some advice and support for the e-fiscalization process, which I will not talk more about this. It might need another discussion about this e-fiscalization, or the new law on public procurement, which basically invites informal businesses to apply for public tenders, even though they are informal, but with the condition to become fully formal. These are all carrot measures. There are some other very interesting measures from the Albanian government, or we can call it like nudges, to encourage customers to be part of this process, because as I said, like informality affects everyone. This is not only on the government's hands. For example, in 2015, and as Katya mentioned, the Chinese example, they designed this tax lottery. Everyone was so happy with this innovative approach. Everyone started to gather receipts, to gather it, to ask the receipt from the business, and then the lottery took place. But the main finding is that when this lottery award came out, citizens says that we don't trust the process, because basically they don't trust the government. So in my opinion, it was not a very successful measure because of the process, not because of the measure itself. Another nudge is, for example, very simple key messages we always and every day see in a very visible place in businesses, saying that if the business do not provide you with a tax coupon or a receipt, you have the right not to pay. So basically, if they get you a receipt, you have the right to pay. I'm not quite sure if everyone sees this message in a coffee bar or in other businesses, but that's a legal obligation. And the latest one is very interesting, though. It's an application the Albanian government designed in 2019. So as a note, we don't need to invent the wheel, because the best practices are out there from other countries. This kind of application invited all the citizens and businesses as well to report corrupt cases or informal business activities. So at the beginning, the Prime Minister and other public officials launched this application. They were very, very happy because they measured the success of this application by the number of people that downloaded the application. But this is not an indicator to measure the success of this application. The success of this application, in my opinion, must be measured by the amount of use from the citizens. So this kind of application has been previously implemented in our neighbor country in Montenegro, and I want to talk more about this during our panel discussion. And that was a very successful application. In Albania, in my opinion, that's not very successful because citizens are not using it. And if you see the messages or the reviews in the App Store, they always say this is not working. Or is anyone follow up with my request or with my report? Or where does the money go if you catch a business informal? I don't know. Like basically, they are just claiming that the government is not transparent in managing this kind of application. And the latest one, which is very, very interesting in my opinion, and this is very novel in Albania, and it has been designed with the support of some international organizations, is the initiative undertaken by tax administration. It's an experiment, it's a nudge example, which aim to change the taxpayer behavior. It's very interesting because basically it was developed or it implemented during the coronavirus crisis in March 2020. Look at the two both letters. What is this about? The tax administration identified some businesses which basically were undeclaring the salaries of their employees. So they knew it from the system, like a certain type of business basically was under declaring the salaries. So they designed two different letters. But basically the purpose was the same. They wanted the increase of the salaries declaration. So the first letter, if you see, is designed as using this kind of nudge approach, saying that you should know that undeclared wages for your employees are detrimental to their well-being. This deprives them of future retirement, of the health and employment benefits they have earned through their work, while reducing the quality of public services that benefit your business, family, and community. As taxpayers of this country, we have the responsibility and civic obligation to meet our tax obligation. So this is a very friendly communication. This is a nudge letter. While the second letter, it serves the same purpose, but the way it is written, it is totally different from the first one. I'm not reading the entire letter, but I'm just underlining a very simple, like the words. They are emphasizing the sanctions they are emphasizing the penalty. So what will happen with the business if they continue keep undeclaring their salaries? Saying that, so we continue to monitor the declaration of your salaries and will address the irregularities by applying the sanctions provided by law. So what was the finding of this experiment? It's very simple. With the first category of businesses that received the first nudge letter, the amount of increasing the declaration of salaries were really high. So it was really impactful. While for the second category of businesses that received this letter, it was no impact. So basically, I would just highlight that nudge letter produced significantly larger payroll declarations, while enforcement messages had no significant net impact. Am I saying that this is like a magic stick? Of course not. But this is a very innovative example which took place for the first time in Albania. This will not resolve the economic informality. This example, of course, should be monitored in other time frames, not only during the COVID crisis-19, but this is a very innovative way of changing the approach with the taxpayers. So in all this very short introduction, a short presentation about the measures, the key question is what is missing in the government measures and in other actors' measures to tackle undeclared economic informality in Albania. I'm just leaving it here because basically we all need to reflect on this question. And I'm sure we will bring up some very interesting messages and examples during the panel discussion. Thank you so much, and please let me know if you have any question. You can just write to the Q&A, or you can just reach me out through my email addresses. Thank you so much, Katja.
Thank you so much, Bruna, for your short but very informative presentation. So I would just say that this last example that Bruna mentioned of two different letters that went to the businesses. So this is an example of framing. And so we would like right now to present you another example of what we believe might be a nudge, which is an animation video, a really just 3-minute story based on the real story of a business in Albania. And after that, we would like to very quickly answer 3 questions to see how this nudge would work, how effective it would be. So let's please, the organizers, can you please play the video right now? Thank you.
Nëse jeni një startup ose person fizik, me siguri keni bërë një vlerësim të përfitimeve dhe rreziqeve që sjell formalizimi i biznesit tuaj, që mund të përfshijë regjistrimin e biznesit dhe funksionimin në përputhje të plotë me procedurat tatimore, procedurat që rregullojnë marrëdhëniet e punës dhe detyrimet e tjera ligjore që rregullojnë funksionimin e një biznesi. Historia e 2 vëllezërve mund t'ju ndihmojë të vendosni.
Përshëndetje, unë jam Arbri.
Dhe unë jam Besniku.
15 vjet më parë, vëllai im dhe unë, ndërkohë që ishim akoma student, nisëm të prodhonim reklama të thjeshta për familjarët dhe miqt, duke shfrytzuar si mjedis pune apartamentin e prindërve. Pas 2 vitesh punë, kërkesa nisi të rritej dhe hapësira e apartamentit nuk ishte mjaftueshme për të përballuar aktivitetin në rritje të biznesit. Nga ana tjetër, duke qenë të paregjistruar si biznes, kjo bënte akoma më të vështirë sigurimin në një ambienti më të madh pune, punësimin e stafit të nevojshëm për përballimin e porosive të reja, si dhe zhvillimin e bashkëpunimit me biznese formale. Kështu, ne vendosëm të bënim regjistrimin e biznesit me statusin e personit fizik, si një mënyrë për të siguruar rritjen e biznesit ton.
Për 6 vjet, biznesi i vëllezërve po rritej me ritme të shpejta, por ndërkohë nisën të përballeshin me problemet që sillte tregu informal në Shqipëri. Për shembull, shitjet me para në dorë, pa faturë shoqëruese apo kontrata të rregullta krijonin vështirësi në planifikimin afatgjatë të biznesit. Nga ana tjetër, paqëndrueshmëria e të ardhurave shkaktonte probleme, sidomos në punësimin e stafit të ri, që ishte tepër i nevojshëm për biznesin. Për më tepër, bashkëpunimi me furnitorë dhe klientë që punonin ende në mënyrë informale e vuri biznesin në rrezik të kontrolleve të shpeshta tatimore. Përfundimisht, vëllezërit vendosën të formalizonin edhe më tej biznesin e tyre, duke e regjistruar atë si një shoqëri me përgjegjësi të kufizuar. Me rritjen e shkallës së formalizimit dhe strukturën e duhur të biznesit, vëllezërit mund të investonin në pajisje të reja dhe materiale prodhimi, mund të punësonin staf të talentuar dhe të kualifikuar, si dhe të konkuronin në tenderat publik.
Formalizimi i biznesit ton ja ka vlejtur plotësisht.
Përveç lehtësimit të sigurimit të burimeve financiare, formalizimi i plotë i biznesit ndihmoi në përmirësimin e menaxhimit dhe sigurimin e disa kontratave me furnitorë dhe klientë huaj. Kontrollet tatimore u bën më pak shqetësuese dhe shumë më të ralla. Kompania ishte gjithashtu më e përgatitur për të përballur me krizën e COVID-19, pasi mundi të sigurojë pak të plot për gjithë punonësit e saj, sepse përfitoi mbështetje nga qeveria, duke përmbushur të gjitha kriteret e një biznesi formal dhe që vepron në përputhshmëri me kuadrin ligjor në fuqi. Funksionimi i kompanisë mbështetur në baza të forta të integritetit në biznes ka krijuar mundësi bashkëpunimi me klientë kombëtar dhe ndërkombëtar, duke përfshirë këtu bankat, organizatat ndërkombëtare, spitalet publike dhe aeroportet.
Tashmë kompania jon ka mbi 50 punonjës. Ne kemi fabrikën tonë të prodhimit dhe një reputacion të mirë si një kompani shqiptare plotësisht transparente dhe e përgjegjshme.
Formalizimi i plot i biznesit, i shoqëruar me vendosmërinë, zgjuarsinë dhe përkushtimin ndaj integritetit e kthyen një biznes të vogël të 2 vëllezërve në një histori suksesi. Formalizimi jo vetëm që ndihmon bizneset të rriten, por gjithashtu ndihmon në zhvillimin ekonomik të një vendi, rrit angazhimin e qytetarëve në vendimarrje dhe promovon transparencën dhe llogaridhënien në mënyrë që të përfitojë e gjithë shoqëria shqiptare. Qendra ndërkombëtare për sipërmarrjen private forcon demokracinë përmes sipërmarrjes private dhe reformave të orientuara drejt tregut. Formalizimi i ekonomisë luan një rol të rëndësishëm në këtë proces.
Thank you very much. So that was a short 3-minute video, and I just want to emphasize that this is not a made-up story. It actually based on a real story of a real startup company and their path towards formalization. So now we would like you to take a very quick pop-up quiz before we move on to our panel discussion. So the pop-up quiz will be in Albanian, but the English translation will be in the chat. So if you could please, so the English translation is already in the chat. If you could please pop up, yes, these are the questions right in front of you. So the first question for those who do not understand Albanian, would you consider sharing this video with your friends and colleagues? The first one, yes, then no, I'm not sure. Again, would you consider sharing this video with your friends and colleagues? The question number 1, do you think this video can inspire other entrepreneurs to consider more formal practices? Yes, no, not sure. Again, the second question, do you think the video can inspire other entrepreneurs to consider more formal practices? Yes, no, not sure. And the third question, do you think that the level of informal economy in Albania can decrease in the next 5 years? Yes, no, not sure. Again, the third question, do you think that the level of informal economy in Albania can decrease in the next 5 years? Yes, no, not sure. I'll give it another 10 seconds for you to fill out this pop-up quiz. Please, everyone, attendees, help us to measure the impact of this nudge. All right, as we are testing the potential nudges to tackle the formal economy. So this is an example of framing nudge. So please go ahead, 5 more seconds. 5 more seconds, English translation is in the chat for these questions. We got good solid response rate right now. So you have, okay, let's 10 more seconds, 10 more seconds. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. We will have the results. I don't think we will be able to share the results right now of this, but we'll definitely, okay, actually we do. Here you go. Would you consider sharing this video with your friends and colleagues? Yes. So we have out of 16 respondents, 14 said yes, 88% of the respondents. The second question, do you think this video can inspire other entrepreneurs to consider more formal practices? Again, we have 81%, which is 13 out of 16 respondents said yes. And, and the third question, do you think that the level of the formal economy in Albania can decrease in the next 5 years? Well, 63% said yes, 13% said no, and 25% are not sure. Okay, this is a very interesting response. Thank you so much, everyone who participated in this quiz. It definitely gives a good idea that not just potential like this one might actually work and do the role of inspiring or educating and moving forward with our agenda. All right, and now this is my pleasure to introduce our panelists for this session, for the panel discussion. Professor Colin Williams is a professor of public policy at the University of Sheffield, UK. For the past 30 years, he has been researching the issue of undeclared work and how it can be tackled. He has published 20 books and over 500 peer-reviewed journal articles on this topic. Since 2016, Professor Williams has been the lead expert on undeclared work to the European Commission's European Platform Tackling Undeclared Work. In 2018, he was appointed Chief Advisor on Undeclared Work to the Regional Cooperation Council, advising 6 Western Balkan countries on their national strategies. And in 2020, was appointed lead expert to the Western Balkan Network tackling undeclared work. Beyond Europe, Professor Williams works with the International Labour Organization, ILO, implementing both strategically and operationally recommendations 204 on the transition to formality. Welcome, Professor Williams. And we are happy to have here our own Dr. Kim Batcher, who leads the Center for International Private Enterprises Policy and Program Learning Initiative, which captures lessons learned in democratic and economic institution building around the world. This initiative shares strategies, best practices, and lessons with an international network of reform leaders. Dr. Batcher has written and edited numerous resources for SAIP, especially a toolkit on public-private dialogue and anti-corruption, a report on creating the environment for entrepreneurial success, 3 case study collections, and SAIP Guide to Governance Reform and SAIP's 25-year impact evaluation. Dr. Batcher has published articles in the Harvard Business Review, Party Politics, Science Review, and the Business History Review. He has taught as an adjunct professor at George Mason University School of Public Policy and was previously a research associate at Harvard Business School. Dr. Batcher has a PhD in political science from Johns Hopkins University and a bachelor's degree from Harvard College. Welcome, Dr. Batcher. All right, so we have 3 panelists. And we have just a couple of questions, and we also have a couple of questions from the chat. So please, attendees, put your questions in the chat so we can, at the end, try to answer those questions. The first question, what are some of the most successful behavioral change approaches to reduce economic informality from the regional and global perspective? And so I'll go to you, Professor Williams, first, to talk to us about, maybe give us a couple of examples of those successful techniques, and then we'll go to Dr. Batcher and then to Professor Bruno Costa. So limit your responses to probably 3 minutes or so we can move on to the next question. Thank you.
Okay, so how do you change behavior? It's the question on any topic. So how do you change behavior in relation to the informal economy? Well, traditionally, what governments did was, as Bruno said, they focused on punishing bad behavior using what Bruno called sticks to change behavior. The way they did that was by using penalties, sanctions, if you were caught engaging in the informal economy, and they sought to increase the probability of detection. But more modern enforcement authorities have now moved into developing the other side of the coin, which is rewarding good behavior. So they provide incentives to operate in the formal economy. They make it easier and more beneficial to operate in the formal economy. That applies to both employers, to workers, and to consumers. But if you think about it, it's quite obvious. Anyone who's got children, they know that if you're going to change their behavior, it's a lot more effective to reward good behavior than to punish bad behavior. Unfortunately, for many governments, in relation to the informal economy, they don't appear to have learned that lesson. But what we know from all different spheres of life is that it's much more effective to reward good behavior than to punish bad behavior. So what modern enforcement authorities have started to do is to develop these incentive systems, the lottery system for asking for a receipt, tax deductions if you purchase informal goods and services. But this still assumes that anyone who engages in the informal economy is a rational economic actor, that they weigh up the costs and benefits, and then if the benefits outweigh the costs, they engage in the informal economy. But what Bruna showed in her talk in Albania is that this is not always the case. In Albania, as she highlighted, there's this view that even if you are formal, you don't get anything back. That either public administrations are corrupt or politicians are corrupt, put money in their pockets, don't provide public goods and services for the money they pay. So participants in the informal economy are also social actors, not just rational economic actors. And to change their behavior as social actors, you've got two choices. As your video showed, you can engage in education and awareness raising campaigns about the benefits of formality. And your video was an exemplar of that because it emphasized the benefits of engaging in formal work. But the argument is those videos like that will never actually work and result in behavioral change until the formal institutions themselves reform. So you also need this reform of the formal institutions of the state as well. And there's to improve what I call vertical trust, the trust between citizens, employers and workers, and their trust in the state. But there's the research around the world increasingly shows it's not just vertical trust you need to improve, it's also what I call horizontal trust. Bruna talked about it to finish when she said that businesses believe other businesses are engaged in informality, so why should they be formal? And statistics like Bruna put up actually decrease horizontal trust because they show that the informal economy is large in Albania and that leads to a decrease in horizontal trust. What we actually need is to put up statistics which show how many businesses are compliant in Albania and compliant on different issues, so as to improve horizontal trust. I will finish there. Thank you, Katrina.
Thank you so much, Professor Williams. Yeah, so you already touched on the question of the challenges also to promoting some of these changes, some of these nudges and incentives. Dr. Betcher, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Katja. Warm hello to our audience in Albania. It is such a privilege to be speaking to leading businesses and entrepreneurs. This is really fascinating conversation that Professor Costa has started for us. It is very important to be thinking about behavior, new ways of approaching informality, and some innovations. Well, first of all, I really agree with what Professor Williams said about rewarding good behavior and reforming institutions and notions of trust. I'd like to kind of broaden our thinking about incentives. Incentives are crucial to shaping behavior and systems. Too often, I think the understanding of incentives is very limited. So when governments are trying to experiment around what positive incentives work, sometimes it's something very sort of easy to test, very small, like, we will reduce a fee, or we'll give one of these subsidies or tax incentives. And I think you need to think more about what could be the real benefit to certain businesses to being formal, what really matters to them. And already we've heard examples today. Is it about that ability to get that formal finance, to have a larger facility, to advertise publicly and reach customers in a bigger market, to have formal contracts with talented employees, or overseas suppliers, or what really matters? That's only going to matter to some businesses. But if you talk about framing is connecting with what matters. And I think businesses, they're smart. So they know what matters to them. It's not necessarily a short-term incentive. Now, as far as the nudges go, and the example that Professor Costa shared about just sort of positive framing, I think that's the right sort of messaging. I am a little surprised that it worked. But if something works, great. Like, see if there's something there. I don't know Albania. So if something's working in Albania, that's a great place to start. But we have a lot of studies that show, Sri Lanka, for example, that, awareness raising and education had almost no effect on compliance or formalization. There's a study in Benin, well known, that found, it depends how you interpret it, that some businesses who received information about registration and had accessibility, like 9.1% of them went ahead and formalized. So, is that good or bad? Depends how you look at it. But then additional interventions increased the formalization. So if there was training on management and accounting and banking, that led to 13% formalization. An additional like tax services and mediation led to 15.8% formalization. So the point is that it's more than awareness raising, and nudging kind of assumes that, the system works and you just need to get people into it. I'd like to make the case for more two-way communication and locally discovered solutions. I have one place what I've really seen informality firsthand is in Peru, in Lima, and I have visited informal markets all around the city, and they're all different, and different sectors, different degrees of formality, different solutions and failures. The thing that stood out for me for one of the successful solutions, and this was dealing with street vendors who had blocked 8 blocks of a major city road in the area of Malvinas. And what struck me was the negotiated solution. So the municipality talked to the associations of informal business, and they compromised. They agreed on a licensing arrangement. Then the city invested in some like warehouses, some property in the area to move these businesses. The associations collectively purchased land and then mortgaged the spaces to their members. So there's a deal between the association and their members, a deal between the association and the municipality, and also a deal with some finance companies. The city did monitoring. The association was responsible for ensuring that members met their commitments. And in fact, these businesses did move into the new location, reached customers, created like 50,000 jobs, doubled the property value. So, we know some things need to be fixed, like tax systems, but I think those negotiated agreements are one way to go.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Batcher. And now So here we're going to Professor Costa. Professor Costa, if there is anything you can add from your presentation on the topic.
Thank you so much, Katya. As Professor Williams and Professor Betcher came with some global examples, I will just give a very simple example. I will not go so far. I will just go to our neighbor country, Montenegro, and about the application on informality, be responsible. Basically, we just need to look around and to see that in Western Balkan countries, we share almost the same political and economic issues, and we will see these kind of very positive examples. So in 2014, the Montenegrin government, in cooperation with the Faculty of Engineering, tried to design an application and invited all the citizens to report corrupt cases and informal economy activities from the businesses. This application is amazing. If you just see it and download it from this, it's in Montenegrin language, but it's amazing. You see all the reports from citizens. It's very updated. And the same application was implemented in Albania, like in 2019. And in my opinion, that was not successful. Why was that not successful? That's a question the government should ask itself. Mainly, we should learn from the failures. I think that one of the reasons why this application was not used from the citizens is because of the lack of transparency. So the government requires the citizens to report cases, but the key question citizens ask, why should I do this? Why should people in Montenegro do this? Because the Montenegrin government gives them the chance to decide about the money collected from their report cases. So if I report a case, and then it will followed up by the tax administration, and then it will put a fine or a penalty. Then where does this money go? I decide as a citizen where this money will go. And you vote in this application, and the money goes for funding, for example, restructuring a public school or a public hospital or other kind of services. Why this is not happening in Albania? This is the moment to reflect on these examples. Why it's very similar in political and economic context. While in these countries, in two countries, the same initiative did not work in Albania, but it worked in Montenegro. From the conversation with colleagues from Montenegro, this is a great opportunity to follow up by the Albanian government. But this is not to be done only by the government. This should be in cooperation with other actors as well, like the private sector, the citizens and other actors. And another example, great example, is from Bosnia and Herzegovina, is a nudge. Professor Williams has worked on that project. It's a very simple message coming up with a video as the one we shared today of an employee highlighting the benefits of getting registered as an employee, about the pension, about the loan, about the health and social security. And I will leave it here because I know that we are running out of time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bruna. So we do really only have 6 minutes left. So in the remaining time, what I would like to do is that, how about we answer one question, all panelists, and the question is about what can private sector do? We have a bunch of participants from the leading business associations in Albania on this call. What can they do to support the process of tackling the informality? Again, some of the things that you already mentioned is that the formal institutions, they have to be reformed. But what can business associations or businesses, entrepreneurs can do? Is there anything they can actually do? So very quickly, Professor Williams.
I will very quickly go through what some of employer associations and employers in other countries have done, because it's not government's responsibility, it's everyone's responsibility. In Czechia, they were concerned, the employer federations and the trade unions, with temporary work agencies and how some of them were fraudulent. So they developed a non-compliance list, a blacklist of those temporary work agencies, and they named and shamed them and said, do not employ your temporary workers from those agencies. Other employer federations with trade unions have set up identity cards in their workplace, such as especially in the construction industry, so that you can see who is a registered worker and who is not. Other employer federations have set up complaint reporting tools for informal activities, so that you can report it to them. Others have adopted what I call supply chain responsibility. They voluntarily decided to police their own supply chains to ensure due diligence and there's no informality in it. There's a lovely app US Department of Labour have produced called the Comply Chain app, which could be just imported into Albania and used. Other employer federations, you often assume tax incentives are the responsibility of government. They're not. An employer federation with trade unions can provide an incentive for workers. In Romania, in the construction industry, a worker pays in 5% of their salary over the year, and then during the winter season, when they can't work, they receive welfare benefits from the employer federation and the trade union, not from the state, from the employer federation and trade union. So you could set up that system. Simple, provide advice to startups so they know how to formalize. If there's entrepreneur breakfast clubs, you can provide buddy support, one-to-one support. An older entrepreneur helps a younger entrepreneur set up in a formal manner. Provide free marketing. In Greece, Employer Federation of Small Businesses provides free marketing to legitimate businesses in the city centre of Athens on their products to tourists. Lots of campaigns you can set up. In Canada, there's the Get It in Writing campaign for home repair and maintenance, run by the Employers Association in conjunction with the tax office. And finally, for Albania, for the tourist sector, there's a Fair Hotels initiative, which is being adopted like in Slovenia and Croatia, whereby hotels which respect workers' rights can be advertised on a collaborative platform, so that consumers, especially Generation Z and millennials, who are interested in purchasing socially responsible products, go to those platforms and purchase their hotel nights from those responsible hotels who are legitimate and don't engage in the informal economy. I shall end it there.
Thank you, Professor Williams. Clearly, there are examples of that where the private sector can lead. So we have 1 minute left. So I would like for Dr. Batcher to give the examples, and then we would close. I would just only say that we got 2 questions from the audience you might have seen. One on the incremental changes instead of the industry-wide changes, something that I think we discussed today. So as an example of small and incremental changes, nudges. And the second one on the context that maybe the businesses want to formalize, but actually the employees might not be ready and they're asking that salaries envelope. So something that Professor Williams just addressed partly. So Dr. Batcher, your time, and we will close.
Yes, there's so much the private sector can do. Associations, just by virtue of the work they're doing to improve their industries and their communities and the business environment, whether or not it's an informality project, can be so important. Professor Williams mentioned services. Policy advocacy is an area. SIPE has supported business advocacy coalitions in Moldova, Armenia, where they have actually succeeded in getting things like risk-based tax inspections, which Professor Costa talks about in her paper. Collective action within business, even on anti-corruption. It's not easy, but SIPE has some powerful, successful examples, like 300 of the biggest listed companies in Thailand commit to a system that is recognized by the stock exchange regulators and has a lot of peer review and systems to make it work. Then, apart from setting standards within business, I think there's room for innovation. And I would speak here to the question from Mr. Jones in the chat that I don't think economy-wide or sector-wide, there's one right answer, but I've seen business models, for example, in waste picking, in a poor country like India, where there's actually money to be made and getting gold and elements out of electronics. And the informals are supplying to formals, and there are business models here, and there are some socially motivated businesses that are interested in this area. Higher up the scale, I know in Nigeria that there are many informal medical clinics. And again, there are business models here for providing higher quality patient care. And so these create bridges where there's a value chain, to link the informals to the formal. So it's not only competition between formal and informal. And probably innovation in the digital space. Fintech is very interesting. Informals are using digital platforms. Private company like M-Pesa is well known for mobile finance. But the final thing I would say about innovation is that it does have to go hand in hand with regulatory innovation and coming back to the institutions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, we are a little bit beyond our time of the session, and see everyone stayed on the call. That only means that this is a very, very important topic, and there's a lot of interest in this type of discussions and very practical solutions, where what our esteemed panelists emphasized today, and again, tackle different components of the very, very complex issue. So thank you so much, all the participants, for your active participation. So staying with us until now the end, for voting on our video and asking questions. And thank you so much, Professor Williams, Dr. Batcher, and Professor Costa. Thank you very much. I hope this is just the beginning of our conversation on this, our continuation with this behavioral science approach, and we will continue working and developing and taking on board some of the things that were mentioned and discussed today at the session. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day, everyone. Bye-bye.